Texas. GNC, the Grand National Championship of Motocross Racing, presents the 15th Annual Good Time National, where competitors from all over the nation will vie for thousands of dollars in trophies and contingencies.
Welcome, race fans, to the Golden Eagle Motocross Park here in Dallas, Texas for the 1968 International Motocross. Right here in the great city of Dallas, we want to welcome all the Europeans and the Americans. We're going to have a fine weekend of racing. We need all...
"54 years ago, 1968, Edison Dye, the father of American motocross, brought the Europeans over to America. Motocross world champions and superstars such as Joel Robert, Torsten Hallman, Roger DeCoster, Dave Bickers, and many others came to America to showcase the sport of motocross, the equipment, and the motocross bikes. Edison Dye's series, the INTERAM, International American Motocross Series. In 1968, the series consisted of 8 rounds and swept from East Coast to West Coast. Round number 4 was right here in Dallas, Texas on November 10th, 1968. Up until that point, little was known about the sport of motocross, only what the Texans and other Americans were able to read about in dated magazines. There had only been a couple of, quote, motocross races in the area, or state of Texas for that matter. In fact, the closest thing to motocross in the area at that point were scramble-type tracks with ribbons marking the course layout in open fields and natural terrain. The Dallas track, often referred to as the Golden Eagles MX, was by most accounts probably the very first purpose-built motocross track in Texas, specific built for the INTERAM. The INTERAM race in Dallas was the first big race to be seen here. It literally lit the fuse to the sport here in the Lone Star State, paving the way for our first generation of racers, tracks, and dealerships, the motocross scene as we know it today. Texas motocross pioneers Mark Moore, Joe Joyner, and John Woolley were at the event. With youth on their side, Mark and Joe submitted for their FIM license to twist their throttles that weekend, while John was an aspiring moto photographer ready to document the birth of the sport here in Texas. November 10th, 2022, exactly 54 years later to the day, we take Mark, Joe, and John just south of downtown Dallas back to the track location site for their first time after all these years. The Golden Eagles Motorcycle Club was a motorcycle club based out of downtown Dallas, Deep Ellum to be exact. Deep Ellum is a outer skirt area of downtown Dallas. We bring Mark, Joe, and John down to the old address of the Golden Eagles Motorcycle Club. And what this has to tie in with the Dallas INTERAM basically is the Golden Eagles Motorcycle Club kind of worked in conjunction with Edison Dye to help promote the Dallas 1968 INTERAM here in Dallas that weekend. Down here in Deep Ellum, in downtown Dallas, the Deep Ellum section of downtown Dallas, and we are near the Golden Eagles Motorcycle Club, which is a Harley club that helped promote the races there at the Golden Eagles Motorcycle track. So John, Mark, Joe, what does it feel like to be down here at, down here near the Golden Eagles Motorcycle Club office?
A lot of years have gone by, really.
Well, this is where it started. It started with them.
Yeah, when I hear Golden Eagles, I always think of the track out there,
think of the track
and the club members that kind of police the area ran the smaller races and so on and so forth.
So when y'all weren't necessarily a part of the motorcycle club, y'all were just the dirt bikers that were allowed to go out to the track that is affiliated with the club to ride the motorcycle.
Yeah, because all they did was poker runs and stuff like that in their club.
Field meets.
They were a
Yeah,
biker
field
club,
meets.
but they put on, when motocross started coming around, they built a motocross track. One of the first ones actually that I ever remember around here.
Yeah.
When we started riding motocross.
So in coming into Dallas, Texas, you know, you're out in Fort Worth, Joe. Mark's in East Texas. John, you're out in Halton City, Fort Worth. What is it, and y'all don't get to Dallas hardly ever. I'm sure it's been many years. Mark Moore, you actually helped build a lot of the high rises in downtown with the ironwork. So what does it feel like to just come into Dallas knowing that we're in the documentary and that the track was known as the Dallas Golden Eagles motorcycle? Does it feel odd to be in downtown Dallas after all these years?
After all these years, it does. Definitely.
Yeah.
Unusual, yeah.
And not being able to, you know, when I come down here to work, it was at 6 in the morning, so you could miss all the traffic and all that stuff, find a place to
And
park.
building the high rises.
Yeah.
And Joe and John, you really never had much dealings down in downtown Dallas other than maybe going to that track back in the day.
Yeah, not really, yeah. That's right.
Well,
Other than,
they have toy runs that come through here on occasion for the Harleys.
For the Harleys, yeah.
I can't really think of coming to Dallas for anything other than some kind of motorcycle event, actually.
Yeah.
Well, later on, music and concerts.
Yeah.
You know, Memorial Auditorium,
Little nightlife.
State Fair Music Hall, Moody Coliseum, Hendrix, the whole deal.
Mark got into partying after he quit racing motorcycles.
Yeah, I've been always pretty good at partying. Until the later years. Now I don't do anything.
Well, guys, enjoy
Now I
your
go to
meal.
doctors.
Yeah, now it's doctors. We want to thank the Angry Dog for allowing us to come in here and do our thing and enjoy your meal. And here in a little bit, we're going to be literally leaving here and hightailing it out of Dallas up 175 Hahn Freeway over to y'all's stomping grounds where y'all literally learn how to race motocross.
Find the old
track.
Yeah. Outstanding.
It's going to be fun.
It's amazing.
What I've got here, guys, that I've been holding back on telling you to, okay? Is these are the original insurance paperwork from Edison Dye. From Edison Dye. From CNA Insurance, Continental National American Group, the limited liability from this race, okay? The certificate of insurance, and you are going to look through this in a second. The Dallas International 500, Gene Jetty, Gene Gromit, Glenn Vincent, Chuck Minert, Bill Sitherton, John DeSoto you're talking about earlier, and their points that they earned, okay? 250 International Americas, Glenn Vincent, Gene Fetty, John DeSoto, Ed Terrell, okay? 250, same thing, Dallas, November 10th, 1968. Ed Terrell, John DeSoto, all the names, the points they've earned. Same thing, Cars Maker, Gunnar Lindstrom, Dave Bickens, Joe Rivera, Thorson Hall.
Thorson Hall ride then? I didn't think.
He wasn't there at
He
68.
got hurt in Pepco. He didn't ride down.
Okay, so watch this.
Okay.
250cc overall, first place, Joe Joyner.
Junior class.
Yeah, but look at
Junior
that.
class.
Tell me what you think, Joe. That's
Well,
your name on 55-year-old signing and entry forms.
Exactly. And this is
It's
mine.
just incredible that we're sitting on all this paperwork. It's the actual entry forms, it's the ledger sheets, it's the handwritten notes, the checks. I've got the checks. It's incredible that we have all this paperwork, that it wasn't thrown away, burned in a fire, lost. Edison Dye held on to all that paperwork, and of course he passed away, I believe in 2007, but he left all that paperwork with a friend of his named Don Ince, and Don lives in San Diego, California, and I located Don and saw the paperwork, and I acquired the rights to the paperwork, and Don sent me extra paperwork, but just they had the, whether they're pack rats or not, I don't know, but they had the, Edison Dye at least had the forethought to never get rid of all that paperwork. And so in talking with Scott Wallenberg with Racer X magazine, he was explaining, Shan, you know, he runs an Interam page on Facebook dedicated to the history of the Interams, and when I told him I was sitting on all this paperwork, he was just blown away. He and Davey Coombs both, they said, you know, Scott said that it's kind of the hidden jewel, it's kind of the lost event. The Dallas Interam, there just wasn't a lot of history on the Dallas Interam. More here, it's kind of the same, but it's just crazy that the paper clip it's got the rust mark on the paperwork.
Where in the world did you find all this stuff?
I'm a bad
You got
dude,
ways.
Joe.
You
I'm a
got
bad
ways.
dude.
Yeah.
Don't ask questions, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
But this is the original Edison
I'm
Dye.
thinking, wow, that blows my mind. That it's the original. It hadn't been thrown away or lost somewhere.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know
Amazing.
Bill Davis said he
Amazing.
got a hold of a bunch of it somehow.
Here's
Yeah,
the
he
expense report. Airfare for Delta, SMU campus for advertising, KXL radio for advertising.
Wow.
Okay.
No
What they
kidding.
paid, you know, the trailer, the concession stands, the police officers. They hired
Crazy.
10 police officers. That he was 5 times Acosta.
Yeah.
They were only paying him $360, so they paid him 90 less than Rivera. Bickers, cars maker. There's your
Auburn
patrol.
should have been-
There's your patrolman. Your 10 last name on the patrolman. What they got paid.
Oh, no way.
Is that not crazy?
Really?
They were sitting on this paperwork, guys.
Iron hell.
No kidding.
We're sitting on this paperwork.
Unbelievable that it's still here. Wow. Just
Here's the entries, concessions, SMU, airfare, expenses, advertising. It's all listed out here. We'll go over this more at a later date, but I
Yeah.
wanted to show y'all this while we're sitting out here at Diamond
Unbelievable.
Don's.
Yeah,
This is great.
Uh,
Fantastic.
it's amazing somebody even hung on to it.
Yeah.
I'll tell y'all the story on that later, but
Okay.
I just wanted to surprise y'all and say, after what we're doing here with this whole thing, we've got in our hands as much of the original paperwork as even possible, that it's
Too
still here.
Yeah.
Too cool. Up here, went across. There's a little jump here, a rough straightaway, and there's a jump there where they made the thing for the bulldozer to get on the truck. That's
Right,
the
right,
jump
made
and
a
the launch
ramp.
off.
Yeah.
Let's see, we turn left and back on the start line. My kid broke his leg right here on one of these jumps. And he went up on the handlebars, went over, and broke his leg. That was on a Wednesday on practice day.
Yeah.
And Mark and I went and saw him on the hospital that night. Ran out of
Really?
gas downtown and put my Castrol R gas in the gas tank. We could smell it at the traffic lights. Smell the Castrol R. And anyway, we went around that off camber there, went back up, turned left, went down this straightaway, another big jump, right. And this was that real rough straightaway. I said, how the hell are these guys doing this?
Marcel Works, I got a
Amazing.
picture.
They were going that fast.
Oh man, it could just worlds apart from us.
Yeah.
It's just, you know what?
There's a
so
Made you want to go back to the pits.
I mean, that big jump, we were kind of jumping off. These guys were flying off.
Yeah.
Boom. I mean, holy shit, how they doing that?
Yeah.
And the crowd, when they'd come around a track and turn, the crowd would run over here and watch them. And they'd make the turn, the crowd would run over here and watch them.
Really?
Everybody-
So
Yeah,
what
just-
kind of crowd was there? Nobody
there's
knew
a-
about
well,
motocross then.
Edison Dye got with Channel 11
Yes.
and to film practice on Wednesday. Had a practice there on Wednesday to
Oh,
get
nice.
Channel 11, and they put it on the news. And sure enough, it had a big crowd come out there to see them. And it's pretty good.
Yeah, they talked it up pretty good. You know.
Pretty good thing
You
to
see
get it on
that, you see
TV.
that in Wooley's photos.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of to get it, you know, to the.
Sure.
That was the SMU marketing. They marketed the SMU
Yeah.
campus
That's
to
fantastic.
get the college
Yeah.
students out there to check out the sport of
What
motocross.
Yeah,
was
'cause
the
see,
business part of it behind
The
the
general
scenes?
public knew nothing of motocross. Well, we didn't hardly,
Yeah.
other than what we read in Cycle News and Cycle
Yeah,
World.
yeah.
And we read, remember, B.R. Nichols,
Look here.
Continental Report. We
You didn't have
read
any tracks to
Cycle World.
practice on, did you?
No,
Look here,
no.
36500 Junior, Douglas Parks.
Doug Parks, yeah.
That's Kyle Parks' dad.
Dad.
Yeah, Kyle's dad, yes.
Yeah.
George Parks' brother.
And there's Joe.
I
So-
won the
so
Don
Mark-
Kirk, he was a big heavy set guy.
I
So-
won the first heat.
I've got more paperwork on the way.
Okay.
It just didn't arrive yet, but it's got it Mark, has your name and address where you bought your FIM card, where they hand wrote down, these people bought FIM cards, and the first name is Mark Moore, Plano, Texas, with your address. So that is on its way, just so you know.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I had to get my parents to sign just to get the FIM license, you know.
Jimmy Lutz.
Oh yeah, Jimmy Lutz.
The second heat of the Open Junior, everybody was doing a cross-up. The Europeans were doing cross-up. So the crowd was, every time you went over a jump, the crowd was going, do a cross-up, do a cross-up. So I'd hit that one jump coming out of the woods.
Bill Casson.
And I'd do I bounced way up to the left and had a dirt clod that big, get my ship over the footpad.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
the third gear. So I rode.
Trying to get
Yeah.
to it and
But,
everything else, you know.
Bill Casson bought the Yamaha shop from
From Doug.
Doug Parks and also.
Yeah, 'cause Doug got cancer and passed
Doug had
away.
married a real rich lady and she bought the Yamaha shop for him.
So what do you think about this paperwork again, guys?
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Man, it's
It's
even
amazing. Just
still
blows me
around.
away that it's still around.
Yeah.
You know.
And y'all's names are on this. You know, Ed Terrell's name, Casson's name, the guys y'all raced with.
We were there.
Yeah.
Y'all were there.
We were young wannabe
Well, I mean,
motocrossers.
they was
We wanted to be like they were.
Among the first.
They wore big John boots and they folded big wool socks over the top. So we bought big wool. We wanted to look
sure.
like the Europeans.
Absolutely, I remember that look
Yeah.
for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
George,
Even though we couldn't ride them, we wanted to look like them. You know.
George Parks started selling Huskies and
Yeah,
Pentons
Pentons, mhm.
out of his garage.
And Urban.
And Ed Terrell bought that first Husky from George, and I bought that first Penton.
Yeah.
And then George started importing Torsten Hallman boots,
And leathers.
leathers,
Hallman leathers.
Wow.
gloves, the whole thing. And then he was
So cool.
and he was the guy that always knew what was happening in Europe. So
Yeah.
Light Brown them nicknamed him Scoop.
Yeah, 'cause he had
Oh,
So
scoop.
he
yeah.
always
had
had
the scoop,
Scoop
huh?
Parks. Yeah. He always had the
That's
lowdown
great.
on what was happening.
Yeah.
The Tar-
But up until then, I mean, all I did was I wanted to be a flat
flat tracker, scrambles,
yeah,
right? Scrambles.
whatever.
Lake
But
Lavon
I'd get in the
scrambles.
What there
cycle.
was.
I'd get in the cycle world, and you'd thumb to the back of it, and that would be the European section.
Yeah.
There'd be Robert and all these guys.
Jumping. Caught your
Yeah.
attention. Catching air.
Yeah.
Doing the cross
And
up.
so,
just
Right,
like-
doing the
that's
cross-up
really
and
what
stuff.
I'm,
Yeah.
interested. So when they first came over, it was just unbelievable. And then before that race out there at the Stump Jumpers. And,
Right. That's a
and Lars Larson, he worked for Edison Dye. He
Yeah, y'all
came
said
out.
that there was a race at the Stump Jumpers and there was also a race at Lavon, but that this was actually the one that, as you said, Joe, lit the fuse.
Oh,
Oh
from
yeah,
that
yeah.
time
Because the
on.
big crowds came out and everybody that liked to race motorcycles. But
Myself,
shit,
I
everybody-
wasn't doing
motocross
anything
tracks
different
started
than
popping up.
anybody else was. It just happened to be there
right people
at the
right
time that
place.
this thing, and all I did was eat, sleep, and drink motorcycles at that
yeah.
time of my life.
And here you are,
Yeah.
here at that time of your life, and here you are,
We've all
Still
been
doing the
there.
same thing.
55 years later, Diamond Dons,
Still doing
racing,
the same
racing
thing.
vintage
Still doing the
motocross out here.
Remember when we went to Wichita, Kansas? Preston Petty was on a TM250,
He was on one.
and
Yeah.
Dick Mann was on a
I
383.
mean, there wasn't but a handful of them things in the
Yeah.
States.
And the Europeans smoked them so bad it was embarrassing.
Wow.
I mean, there's our best, Dick Mann and Preston Petty. Preston Petty was a hell of a rider in his day. Yeah, he was a
But
hell
that
of a
Chuck Feets Minor,
Yeah,
he was
Feets Minor.
he hauled ass. He
Yes,
was
he did.
he just recently passed in the last 2-3 years. He's in his 80s,
Yeah.
but he was
Preston-
on BSA. I remember
Oh,
I remember
wow.
him going around me
Yeah.
out
Well,
there.
really?
Yeah.
Preston Petty just passed away a while back too.
Yeah.
Preston Petty died.
Yeah.
Joe Robert and Dave Bickers.
Yeah.
Quite a few
So
of those
many.
guys. Those old guys, they were a little older than us.
Yeah.
I was 24. DeCosta just turned
When this event was
78.
going on?
DeCosta was 3 weeks. His August 28th. My birthday's September 19th.
Yeah, I just noticed that
Oh,
on
okay.
Facebook that his
Yeah, he just turned 78, and I'll turn 78 in a couple of weeks.
yeah, I either turned 16 or 17 the day before. I'd have to do the math.
Over here was about 25.
So you were literally 16 years old out there
Yeah,
trying to race the Europeans.
yeah. He won the one.
24.
Stupidly.
He won the 125
No,
class.
that's so cool, Mark, that you did that. Aren't you glad you did looking back?
Yeah.
Just to have the experience?
Yeah.
Yeah. The
But
first,
you
I
know,
wish I could have done something like
ran
that.
several Interams, the following couple of years, and then some Trans AMAs. But by the time it had turned into Trans AMAs, I'd figure there's no future
Yeah.
riding against these guys. So
Yeah.
I better, do the
remember the
support thing. So I had a
19
couple of pretty good results in support. But,
Hey guys, we are up here at Bates Discount Cycle Parts. Bates has been synonymous to Texas motocross and motorcycle racing since 1968, the same year as the Interam. We've brought Richard White in. He is a long time, Richard, 30 years, nearly 30 years?
That's about right, yeah.
Of officiating, refereeing various sanctioning bodies at the motocross races in Texas, the NMA, GNC, and AMA. So what'd you expect? We're going to go right back to 1968. John, Mark, and Joe had to wait 54 years to get back to the track. So we're gonna make you guys wait just a few more minutes, because Richard White and I are really going to kind of deep dive into where the sport has gone over the past 54 years. You know, the evolution, the progression. And no better person to do that. Richard White, being a referee, he has seen the evolution and the progression of the sport with four-strokes, e-bikes here the last couple of years, Richard. And we'll deep dive into that here in a minute. But you know, Richard, the documentary we've been doing, we went out to the property, okay, where the track was held, and we had to make a couple of trial runs, Richard. And there's a junkyard just next to the property, and we had to get special privilege and approval to park our vehicles at the junkyard. So Richard, 8 years after the Dallas Interam in 1968 would have been 1976. That's when our friend Lucky Nichols with LCS Racing formed LCS Racing back in 1976. So 8 years after the Interam, Lucky Nichols starts LCS Racing. Fast forward all these years, we're literally walking into the junkyard, Richard. It's Adam Hegeson filming, it's Joe, Mark, and John, several of us, and we walk in, back into the junkyard, probably about 200 yards, and I'm not kidding you, there's LCS's Lucky Nichols race box van sitting there in the junkyard. What do you think about that? Is that not incredible? I
mean, that's just cool. That van it's history. I mean, it's part of the motocross history. It's everybody that was anybody in the day. If you looked on the track and there was a fast bike, it had the LCS stickers on it. And Lucky, quite simply, is the man.
Yeah, he is. He is a bona fide national legend and definitely a Texas legend. And you're right, LCS Racing stickers were all over the fenders, the fork guards, and if you were fast, you ran out of his shop. His shop was originally in Mesquite, Texas, near where I live, and then moved over to Garland, Texas. But he ran that for 40 years, but that's just part of the evolution we're talking about. LCS Racing started then in 76, 8 years after that Interam. The Interam, Richard, really ignited the fuse and basically lit up the Texas landscape as far as motorcycle dealerships, tracks, races, racetracks, racers, you name it. That Interam is what really lit the fuse to the sport of motocross in Texas. And let's talk about what we've seen in the past 30 years from, and the simple things, Richard, like ice chests. You know, back then it was styrofoam ice chests. Now, Richard, you walk through the pits, everybody's got an Igloo, some of the other brands, a Yeti, you know, that are super insulated, where your ice stays cool for a 4 or 5 day weekend instead of burning up the styrofoam back in the day. And the lawn chairs, Richard, you know, the old nylon woven strap lawn chairs. Now everybody has the collapsible foldable lawn chairs that you stick it out in a bag and strap over your shoulder and walk. But let's talk about some of the bike evolution, what you've seen.
Well, I'll touch back on what you just talked about, because as a bigger fella, we always had to worry about the lawn chairs we were sitting in. The old nylon weaved lawn chairs, sometimes they didn't work too good for us big guys. So yeah, we appreciate the evolution of the lawn chairs. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you probably busted a few, I'm sure, did you not?
I sure have.
You know, and that's the evolution of just technology. But, you know, with ice chests and lawn chairs, I mean, everybody's sitting around the racetrack. You're outdoors at a motocross race, from the grassroots level all the way to the outdoor nationals. So just kind of interesting putting this documentary together and seeing the ice chests and the photos and lawn chairs and the media. Let's talk about the photography. You know, those old guys were doing 35 millimeter and before, and now everything's digital. Now there's drones. Let's talk about some of the drone footage that our guys at Area 51 are supplying.
Man, some of this footage that we get now with the digital era and stuff like that is so amazing. I've got several friends that are photographers and stuff like that, and to me, you know, you used to take a picture and drop it off at the store and they develop it, but now you have to process the image before you can see it. And these guys have their ways about making those things, but the image quality and the stuff that you can see is just, it's amazing. And who knew all these years ago about drones, you know, and now the drones are taking over the filming. And I'd have to say that the Area 51 guys are probably a cut above. They've got some footage in this, what we're going to be doing here, and the Area 51 drone guys, they've got they're artists with their drones.
Yeah, the technology is just unreal when you look at the black and white images and the color images and the evolution and the detailed. Let's talk about the media. Let's talk about print. You know, it used to be Texas Motocross Magazine. There was Gulf Coast Motorcycle News. There was Riders Digest all throughout the 70s. You and I were more familiar with the Tex MX, with Cat Span's Tex MX, which later became Southern Dirt Bike Journal, which was kind of in a newspaper format. And then Whole Shot Magazine that I worked for many years, and you were very familiar with. We went to colorful color gloss to now with social media, with Facebook, Instagram, all the different social media platforms. There is no print magazine. So let's talk about that for a minute. What are some of your early memories of Tex MX and Cat Span?
Man, Cat, that's going to be a whole documentary with Cat. What an awesome woman. I mean, she came up in a man's world, and she dominated what she did, and there was nothing better than to open the mailbox and get that Tex MX news and get all that ink all over your hands and look at it, and you just wanted to see a picture of your kid in there or check up on the stuff. Nothing better than Tex MX, Southern Dirt Bike, Cycle News. And speaking of Cat, she wrote for Cycle News also. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that she did. What an awesome woman. But you're right, the whole media has progressed, and the technology, you know, it's all on social media, and I'm brand new to social media, so I'm just starting to get it. So that's pretty cool part of our sport, because it's instant gratification. You don't have to wait for a month for the newspaper to come out and see what happened. You can go to the Facebook and dial it right up, and it's right there, and that's pretty cool.
Richard, before you even get out of your Kawasaki Mule to go down to see the protest forums or what's happening, there's already somebody uploading the stuff up to the interweb for everybody across the world. So it happens instantly. But it's cool that we, at our age, Richard, we got to watch the transition from the print to the social media. Really, really, really cool. Let's talk about some of the evolution of the motorcycles. You know, we've got Timmy Riddle Husqvarna tribute bike here, double shock, just crazy technology. And now all of a sudden, the last few years, it was round one of the Winter Series, I believe 2 or 3 years ago. JP and I announced Freestone. You officiated. It was the very first AMA sanctioned electric bike motocross race that we were privileged to be a part of out at Freestone. So let's talk about the evolution. Your son raced growing up, Richard White Jr. raced growing up all throughout the years, and now you see kids, and he probably started on a 65 or 50, and now you see kids out here on basically a 50cc e-bike. So what are your thoughts on that, on the evolution of the motorcycle bike itself?
I'm probably going to go outside the box on this, but I think that those small e-bikes are probably the best thing ever happened to our sport. As far as the technology and the upgrade of our sport, these allow the urban kids that would never get a chance to go out to a field to ride them in their yard, ride them in their backyard. And I'm not saying that the e-bikes are the answer to everything for the future, but man, for the introductory to motocross and the small bikes, these little e-bikes are the thing. And I was privileged to be part of the rules process with the AMA to help bring the AMA electric bike classes in. And never prouder than standing there at that line a couple of years ago when we had that very first ever AMA e-bike race. And we had quite a little turnout that day, and I was happy to be a part of that.
It was kind of a shocker because JP and I were up there announcing, and then all of a sudden, after all these years, we're announcing a race that's dead silent. It was, so we announced in golf mode, you know, kind of toned our voices down and went into golf mode, and we had everybody out in the pits laughing, but it was incredible. It was the very first legal AMA sanctioned e-bike race, and was that 2 or 3 years ago?
I think it was about 3 years ago.
Probably 2020, I believe. But you see little Cannon Zabanik and some of the other little hot shoes right now that are tearing up the 50 and 65cc classes on an e-bike, and you're like, Wow, incredible. How is it that this kid on an electric bike can go as fast or faster than on a regular old two-stroke piston and ring single cylinder bike? But they do. They all do, and it's incredible. It's the evolution of the sport. Back in '68, there was, I think, at the Dallas Interam where I read, I think there was maybe one four-stroke. It was all two strokes, but they probably did not have silencers. It was extremely loud, and just what an incredible thing we've got to witness in the sport of motocross and the progression over 54 years, just on the motorcycles alone. Let's talk about the racers. You know, some of these kids now, Richard, are out there doing things on a 50 and 65 that the older guys back in '68 were hardly or barely or having a hard time doing on 4-inch suspension, 4-inch travel suspension on some of those bikes from '68, '70, '71, and so on.
And a lot of that's the evolution of the machine. You know, they're so much better, the bikes that even these 50cc bikes are way better than those older ones were, those guys. And these kids nowadays, they're the high-end ones they're at a very young age are trained athletes. They have a program, and I don't know that existed many years ago. I think it was let's put some moto out and drink a little beer and
have a cigarette,
and you know, maybe take a break in our moto and have a cigarette, and you know, but it's just amazing. A lot of it, some of it's the machine, but these kids, they're trained athletes now. It's pretty incredible to see them.
Let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about the equipment, the media, the cameras, even the ice chest to the lawn chairs, the simple stuff, but let's talk about the racers. You know, we've been very fortunate, Richard, very, very fortunate to have witnessed, I refer to it to the mid-2000s, just a shrine of riders: Matt Lemoyne, Blake Wharton, Tyler Wharton, Zeb Smith, Sean Hackley, help me out here, Will Hahn, the Hahn brothers, Tommy Hahn, Kyle Cunningham. There's so many. Those were the top tier guys that all graduated the Supercross ranks. Blake Wharton, thankfully, landed a few lights class main events. Most of them had pretty good longevity and long careers as two-digit pros. Will Hahn won a championship, then went on to become team manager for a couple professional teams. But let's talk about, you know, some of those racers from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and who we see now, and the evolution of those racers. Since you're talking about athletes, and they are total athletes, what are your thoughts on some of the guys we've got to witness?
Man, of course, I've just been blessed with a wonderful career path that's taken me throughout and touched the lives of a bunch of these kids. And we're here at Bates Cycles in Dallas today, and sure enough, right up here, over here on the wall is one of Will Hahn's #1 plates, and that's just cool. I mean, these guys were friends of ours, and you know, to see these kids and to watch them grow up, and all the ones that came by and hung out and said hi or whatever, and they line up on the gate at Supercross or the outdoor motocross, and that's an evolution. If you want to talk about evolution, that's the evolution of things, is as these kids grow up and they get their factory ride, and then they get their outdoor ride or their Supercross ride, and to watch them excel, retire, and become ambassadors to the sport. The ones that are truly talented, that's the path that I mean, you look at your Andrew Shorts, that's an ambassador, your Trey Kennard, Ryan Villapoto, Jeremy McGrath. These guys were true people, and now they're ambassadors to the sport. And it just makes you appreciate what you got to witness growing up as these kids grew up and came about. That you know, this is cool.
Very cool to be a part of it, and you got to witness it. You got to probably protest or disqualify maybe a few of them. And let's talk about how you got involved with this, because you've been refereeing now for nearly 30 years. So you were at one time that mini dad out there learning the ropes of motocross. So let's share with everybody a little background on how you got into officiating. This is a funny story, guys.
So actually, it was at World Mini Grand Prix in Las Vegas, and I had bought a bike that was a limb at the time, and I'd flown it in from Italy, bought it a plane ticket, and come to find out the bike was illegal, and I got disqualified on the line.
Right.
And that was my path. It's like I had read those rules time and time again. I never understood that there had to be more than 25 of them in the U.S. at that point. And of course, mine was the third one in the U.S. So instead of getting all angry about it, I decided that I was always been a student of what we do, and student of the bikes, and I wanted to become a student of the rules, and I took that opportunity to become good friends with Ron Hendrickson and
with the NMA.
With the NMA, and we started doing NMA stuff, and that was the start of things. Was with Ron, and it disqualified me at a race, and I was like, man, if I don't understand these, people need help understanding them. So let me be that guy.
So you got disqualified at the first big race. Little Richard White Jr. is probably upset. Why can't we race? That formed a friendship. You didn't blow a fuse and act like a maniac. You formed a friendship with Ron Hendrickson, who owned NMA, National Motorsports Association, and basically became a referee, and you lived it. You lived exactly what a lot of these parents are going through now, and that's why you're here in the documentary. A lot of respect for what you've seen, what you've done, and I know that you've seen a whole lot in the past nearly 30 years, and we're kind of what I call the third or fourth generation Texas motocrossers. The guys in the documentary speech of John, Mark, and Joe, they're the very first generation. So while we don't know a whole lot what they went through, we know what the past 25, 30 years worth of Texas motocross has produced, has shown, has seen, what we've been able to be a part of, Richard. So, you talked about the tracks and some dealerships that have come and gone. Let's talk about some tracks. You've got to officiate. I've got to announce. Texas has produced a lot of cool tracks. There was an Interam at Conroe, down in Conroe, down in Houston. There's been Three Palms is down there, Rio Bravo, Lake Whitney Motocross Park, Mosier Valley. There's TNT Raceway all the way up there in Amarillo. There's Spring Valley in Abilene. There's all the Dallas tracks from River Valley to Oak Hill. I consider Freestone kind of a North Texas Dallas track. Village Creek, our good friend Terry Cordray, who's had his life's work has been involved with Ross Downs, Mosier Valley, Village Creek. Some of the tracks, I remember some funny stories with you and I down at Cycle Ranch for the Team USA races, having what we'll call the JP Zuma Nationals around the DNS Kawasaki rig back then. But what are your thoughts on the tracks, man, and the track owners? We see tracks come and go, and one or two tracks will close, and then thankfully another landowner will open up their property, just like Freestone and Swan Raceway with the Clean Foss family have given their life's work to the tracks. But let's talk about some of the tracks you've got to officiate at.
It's always been fun to go to any of the tracks we've gone to, no matter where they were or what state they were in and stuff like that. But in Texas, to see some of the true majestic of quality of some of these facilities and stuff, and you put your Oak Hills and your Freestones and your Lake Whitneys and your Three Palms in that when you go in those places, they are purpose-built facilities for motocross, and it used to be that we'd go and race in Homeboy's Field, and we'd lay down the starting line and over the river and through the woods, and that was a track, and now they're purpose-built facilities, which again goes back to the evolution of how the jump faces are built and how the facilities are built, and everybody's got motorhomes now, so that we need power for the motorhomes. And
back then, the '68 Interam, there was the Europeans showed up in their buses for Mako and CZ and what have you, and Husqvarna, but there wasn't an overabundance of motorhomes. That you had to probably be extremely rich back then to own a motorhome, but it was pickup trucks and vans, and it's not that way now. It was probably a simpler time back then, but as you said, it's the progression. It is what it is now, and there's nothing cooler, as you said. When that sun is coming up, I'm about to fire on the microphone and welcome everybody. You're down smoking your cigar, sitting in your mule, gathering your thoughts on how to officiate and run a smooth, efficient program, and looking out and just seeing motorhomes and trailers, and it's just a sea of them. The evolution of the sport is incredible, and we hope that I know it'll continue on long after you and I are gone, and long after John Woolley, Joe Joyner, and Mark Moore are gone. The evolution of the sport, and those three guys were a part of the very, very, very first chapters, the very first pages of the very first chapters of the Texas Motocross book in general when you're talking about that. Well, Richard, the one thing that probably has me feeling the best about the entire sport here in Texas and everything we get to do is the friendships that we acquire throughout the years. You can have you can see a friendly face for a year, or they race for 5 years or 10 years, and then they quit and they're gone for 10 years or 15 years, and then all of a sudden they're bringing their little kid up to the track, and the friendships never go away. We've formed some of the absolute best friendships ever right here in Texas motocross, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. To me, it's one of the things that's truly unique to the sport of motocross is the friendships that you develop and how they go through the years and stuff like that. And like you said, you know, people come and go, and I've been in it long enough to see them come and go and come and go. But it's really neat that you get to see them come back with their kids racing, and it's a generational thing. And it's, you know, I'm friends with a lot of the parents of the kids, and thereby friends with the kids, and maybe my son was friends with their children, you know. And it goes for generations the way we have these friendships and develop these. And they don't have to be in Texas. They could be in California or Utah or Florida or you know. And when you go to one of those places and you truly feel like you're home because of the friendships that you've developed over the years, it's truly, I believe it's truly unique to the sport of motocross how those friendships come and stay and survive periods of time without seeing each other, and you come back and just like yesterday.
The greatest thing about Supercross is that's the one year when you get 40 to 70,000 people in one single venue, and you're sitting there getting a hot dog or a beer, and all of a sudden you see a guy that you raced with back in 1993 or 92, and you're like, holy cow, there's John Smith. How you doing, dude? What have you been up to? And it's those friendships. You meet friends, they last a lifetime. You're right. We all share kind of the same common denominator, and that's the joy of riding motorcycles, and in our particular case, the motocross scene.
Well, you mentioned Supercross, and that's something that's unique, and I may be the same as a lot of people, but when I go to a Supercross race, I've seen those kids race. It's cool, but you know, I've watched them race before. I go to see my friends.
Yep.
You know, and you walk around and you see those guys that you see once a year or twice a year, and you know, you made those relationships when they're racing the amateur racing, and you see them a lot of times, and then you see them once or twice a year at Supercross, or if you're fortunate enough to travel a little bit, you know, you see them a few more than that. But that's what to me, that's what I go for to Supercross, is to see all my friends and say hi. And the bonus is you get to watch them race, but I've watched them race before. So
well, we've been watching those kids race Supercross since they were on 50s here in Texas for the March Nationals, Spring Nationals, however you want to call it. So Richard, man, it's been really cool kind of walking down the progression of things and leading up to the current side of motocross here in the tail end of 2022. And you know, literally everything came after that Dallas 1968 race. So let's take it to the Golden Eagles Motorcycle Park right outside of Dallas with Joe Joyner, Mark Moore, and John Woolley. Richard,
that's good. They're the true founders of Texas motocross.
They are. A few of the true Texas pioneers of Texas motocross history. Mark Moore is on your right, Joe Joyner is in the middle, and John Woolley, the photographer of the Dallas 1968 International Americans Motocross Circuit Series, was out here shooting photos. And we're literally pretty much on the stomping grounds here of the track to the very date, November 10th, 1968, 54 years ago today. Boys, what does it feel like to be out here? Y'all have goosebumps or what?
It's really crazy. This is something I never imagined anything like this.
Having little flashbacks.
Yeah.
Having a little flashbacks. Y'all, obviously the sport of motocross, y'all were at the very beginning right here in Dallas. It lit the fuse, that race did. Y'all are racing the Europeans. John, you're shooting the photos of the event. All the stuff that came after for the past 54 years, all the tracks, all the racers, all the stuff, all the historical stuff for Texas motocross. How many times over the past 54 years did y'all kind of dream about this race, this property? How many times did y'all think maybe it'd be cool to come back out here and trek through the woods to get to this place?
I never really thought about it. I don't know if y'all did, but it seemed so far away. But motocross after this race just exploded in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So the motocross tracks started popping up everywhere, motorcycle shops, motorcycle dealers, and
Mark, what about you? Did you kind of envision?
Oh yeah, I've always thought about coming back out here and trying to find a place and bring back memories and so on and so forth. And a couple other things. There were some people that I think ought to be their names put out there that were pioneers really before us, and that is George and Doug Parks from Austin, and Light Brown, John Lancione.
It was the AMA referee.
He was the first AMA
Later on,
referee,
yes.
and they had quite a bit to do with all this stuff happening.
And you mentioned Doug and George Parks.
They were from, well, George at the time was from Dallas. Doug was from Austin. Doug succumbed to cancer in the 80s, I believe it is. And Bill Casson later on bought the place from Doug.
And to kind of bring some of you that are watching the documentary, that is Kyle Parks, his father and uncle.
Exactly.
Kyle still races in the plus 45, plus 50 classes here. So the Parks family, synonymous to motocross, and Kyle Parks still racing modern motocross to date. So what about Ed Terrell? He couldn't make this event, but I know Ed was kind of a mentor to you three.
Well,
Yeah.
he was definitely a mentor to me. My brother, when we moved from Dallas to Plano in '65, my brother was in the service. And I met Ed out riding at a little dirt pit across from where Rabbit Run was. And from that time on, he kind of took me under his wing, and we rode constantly at that time, mostly trail riding. But, you know, if there was an enduro that came up, everybody, it was a small community, everybody go ride the enduro. If it was a hill climb, everybody would make a hill climb. If it was flat tracking, everybody do that. So it's kind of a small community till this thing kind of kicked off a little bit earlier at the Stump Jumpers track, which George and Doug, I think, had quite a bit of bearing on Lars Larson coming over here, because George was hooked up with Lars selling Huskies and Pentlands. And,
So there was a couple of tracks, not tracks really, a couple of one-off beginner-style motocross races before the Dallas Interam, but this is really what lit the fuse. John, let's go to you real quick. What was it like coming out here and shooting the Europeans, Joel Robert, Thorsten Hallman, Roger DeCoster, and all the European champions, the superstars of motocross are here? You would have been how old, 20, 21, with a camera out here shooting?
23 probably, 24. So yeah, at the time I had been doing scrambles on a Hodaka Ace 100. And when I found out about the race here, I wanted to come out and see the Europeans come over, and I was in awe of watching those guys ride and how smooth they were, and yeah.
fast.
Let's talk.
I started racing motocross then,
And shooting photos.
and shooting photos.
Yeah.
Mark and I actually went to Wichita, Kansas the week before this race just to watch them. We drove all night. We got there about 2 o'clock, slept in the back of my pickup and froze to death.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were just amazed at their speed, but we didn't get to ride with them. But when they came to Dallas, they had practice day Wednesday. We came out and they were just light years faster than us. Their machines weren't quite so much different, but their momentum and their speed over.
They were just playing.
They were faster everywhere, over the jumps,
Wheeling.
through the turns,
Cutting
rough
up.
stuff.
Y'all were going as quick as you could,
Oh,
and the
we
Europeans
were-
were just
Yeah.
out there having a field day.
I was on a rough straightaway going as fast as I thought I could go, and Charlie Panson passed me on the outside. Husky just bouncing all over the place, and I thought, how those guys do that? And I talked with him a little later. He said, well, it's just like dancing with a woman. You and the machine have to become one, you know. And the guys were just light years ahead of us.
So-
We've been riding enduros and hill climbs before, in TT scrambles, but nothing like motocross, and this is completely new to us.
Completely new. Y'all are the young buck Americans that had no experience in motocross, and those guys pretty much. Joe, you actually won your support classes on Saturday. Let's talk about that, and then Mark, we'll get over to you and how you took a beating from the Europeans but learned a lot.
Well, we practiced with them, and gosh, we were just in their way. They passed us on the inside, on the outside, over a jump, around a turn. So I thought, man, there's no. And too, mainly, I wanted to learn what they were doing, and I thought I could learn better by watching them than trying to race with them. And I thought, man, there's no sense in racing with these guys. There's 25 guys in the race. I'd finish 25th or whatever, But so I decided to ride the sportsman class and watch the Europeans. So sportsman class is made up of mostly just people from all over Texas, and there were some good racers, some good fast guys, but there was no sense at all in
Jack
trying.
O'Leary.
No comparison.
No, even trying to ride with the Europeans. I mean, they were just light years ahead of us.
They were just more dominant. They were dominant.
Oh my gosh, yeah, they were just. Like I say, they were faster than us everywhere. Every part of the track, they were faster than us. So.
Mark, what about your motos on Sunday?
Yeah.
You turned 17 a few days before, and all of a sudden you're lining up against the Europeans. What was going through your head, Mark Moore?
Oh hell, what have I done? What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
Now, I can't remember that many specific things about the race. It's just people going by, and not that many people had their name on their jerseys and numbers and stuff like that. And you couldn't recognize them anyway because you didn't ride with them regular, so you didn't know who was coming around you. So somewhere in one of the motos, there was somebody on a thumper behind me, just dogging me unmercifully. And after about 2 laps of that, our tongue was starting to hang out and everything. And the guy come around, and I remember looking up, and it was Chuck Feets Minard, and
California.
Out of California on a BSA. And I do remember that one specific thing about it. But what I gained most from it was how people were forming berms. I mean, everybody out there was kind of hitting the same marks. I mean, it wasn't plowed 10 foot deep like it is nowadays. And it was muddy that day starting out. And the berms were just rolling up out of the ground. And I went and walked the track afterwards and looked, and I was amazed how these things were just rolling up out of the ground. And everybody was using them to their advantage.
You had never really seen berms develop?
Not locally like that.
Not like
Usually
that.
Dusty, hard packed track. There wasn't any berms being formed.
I'd say Americans would go into a turn rear wheel first. We'd slide into a turn.
Yeah,
And we got
trying to
watch
back
them.
it in.
Yeah, we never went in, hit it with our front end. We didn't trust the front end until we learned to watch them. And so that's something completely new to us, to go into a turn and hit it with your front wheel instead of the rear wheel first.
And start becoming aware of the fastest lines around the
Right.
track.
Instead of
Total learning experience.
Total.
complete learning, yeah.
Total.
Watching the guys, I guess the thing that impressed me or stood out about the Europeans was most of the time they were standing on the pegs, whereas the American riders, Californians, all those, most of the time were sitting down.
Used to flat track.
Yeah, that type of a
Robert
style.
was he was my idol, but he was a feet on the peg stand-up guy most of the time. And later Marty Tripes, same kind of style. Even Mike Johnson locally. Some people can do it, some people can't. But
Yeah.
those three off the top of my head.
So what I find incredible here is, for all you folks watching this documentary, is that you three met 4 or 5 months before that event out at a race in Fort Worth,
Prior, yes.
and became friends,
Right.
as we all do amongst your peers
Right.
and your teenage friends at the motocross races. And for the next 54 years, you guys have remained very good friends. Y'all see each other at the TVRC, Texas Vintage Racing Club events, and it's incredible. So it wasn't also so much about the actual race itself, but it spawned the moto family, as we like to say.
Yeah, the camaraderie.
Yeah, there's never a crossword between us. in all the years.
Friendships for years,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go out to a modern bike race nowadays, and
Yeah,
you can sit right next to people and nobody even talk to you or say hello or anything else. And back then it was a tight-knit family, everybody got along.
yeah. I mean, you can see people you haven't seen in maybe a year or so, and just pick right back up
Yeah.
where you
Oh,
left
yeah.
off last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Just really really cool camaraderie.
What did you take the most out of this, John Woolley, from a, you know, when I think of you and your name gets brought up immediately, I think of you out covering with your camera, shooting the vintage racing scene with your classic Mosier Valley WFO jersey on that you still wear. And by the way, I was hoping and thinking you're going to wear it today. But
well, this was my first bike.
Okay, the
bike,
Hodaka.
So, you know, that's what I started on.
So what did you take out of this as a young aspiring photographer?
Well, I needed a better camera. Really. I mean, I was shooting a camera that was my father's. When I was born, he had pictures of me from that camera. It was an old Argus C3 rangefinder, totally manual. So you had to sort of know what you were doing to be able to get a shot, because there were no meters.
And you have incredible shots that are used in
this
this documentary. So just absolute outstanding photography back then for a youngster with 25, 30-year-old equipment at that point.
Yeah, but soon, not too long after that, I started looking for SLR cameras, and the quality improved somewhat.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was amazing trying to get the best angles, you know, for the shots and that kind of thing. It was just a very learning experience. But
so when you look out here and you see, this is obviously, we're in South Dallas. We're just about 3 or 4 miles out of downtown Dallas where we were. When you look out here and you see just this overgrowth of stuff, obviously we're in the floodplains and the bottom grounds of the Trinity River outside of Dallas. What goes through your mind again? I want to try to put a little more emphasis on, you are here after 54 years of not being here. What does it mean to you, knowing that you went to Mosier, you went to Lake Whitney, you went to Swan, you went to all the historic Rio Bravo, all the historic motocross tracks in Texas, and this one here was Black Gumbo. It really was only around for a couple of years, so it really was not a great track in the grand scheme of things, but this is where it all began for you guys. So what is it, when you look out here and you see all the brush and how it's all overgrown, what goes through your mind knowing that y'all were teenagers out here at one point?
Well, what goes through my mind is we're pretty close to where the actual best of the very world, the world champions, rode their motorcycles. Joel Robert, Charlie Hansen, Roger DeCoster, Ben Auburn, some of the world champs, and they actually rode here, and we actually, you know, we just read about them in magazines for years, and actually see them ride, and they rode so different. Americans would come up to something rough and slow down it. These guys would attack it. They would just seem like they would speed up. They kept their momentum up. They rode different than us, and we just tried to learn from them. And of course, they were our idols anyway, because we'd read so much about them. But to actually see them ride, so to me, this is.
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming.
This is
Pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. Holy ground.
It is.
This is totally ground. This is where.
There's been a great group of folks help out with this whole project, and it's been in the works for a while. And, you know, you and I, us three, Mark and Joe, we talked about this 6, 7, 8 years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but y'all said, Shan, we need to go out, and we'd like to go out off Bruton Road and 2nd Avenue and kind of walk the property and see if we can find the old track. And every year it was kind of one of those things, okay, we'll do that one day, we'll do that one day, we'll do that one day. Always kicking the can down the road like it's easy to do in life and procractinate, but you're here now, man. At 54 years, you're here.
It's really cool.
I felt like we were running out of time.
To
do this.
Well, some of your peers have, and that's unfortunate. But you know what? We're here today, and you guys are the pioneers of Texas motocross and photography. John Woolley, you got to think Adam's here filming this whole documentary, and I used to shoot photos of him and announce his races when he was in the C class on a 125 and an 85. And then he picked up the camera and started shooting photos. So it's the tradition and longevity. The dominoes fall and the next guy pops up with a camera, and it's cool, John Woolley, for you to be out here knowing you supplied the images for the documentary, and you got another young Texas racer here shooting this film right now. So
but from these early days, I mean, that's where everything kind of spawned, and there's always somebody faster than you and younger than you, and it just keeps going like that, on and on and on to where it is today.
We were actually just the right people at the right place at the right time. We were just lucky.
Yeah,
To
I mean,
be into motorcycles. This race came up. So.
I mean, I don't know. I can't remember how much build-up there was to the race before it actually happened. But I remember things kind of coming to a fever pitch, getting ready for the race and just getting pumped up and excited about it.
Right.
And everybody in the area that was involved was all, pumped up and what have you. So, yeah, it was quite a time. Yeah, and for me to line up with three.
It was an event that actually changed their lives.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're lifelong motorcyclist and motocross through and through. It changed, like you said, it changed your life. Elaborate on that.
Well, after we saw the guys ride and saw what could be done on a motorcycle, we wanted to do it. We wanted to, if we couldn't race like them, we wanted to look like them. We wanted to wear the same boots they had. We wanted to buy the big long wool socks. And
wooden clogs. All the Husky guys and everybody over here were walking around with wooden clogs. And then Light Brown got a big shipment of wooden clogs in it.
Yeah.
Before you know it, everybody's walking around clunking around these wooden clogs. I mean, it was just, one of those kind of deals.
We wanted to have the goatskin Toston Harmon leathers. So I ordered a set of leathers, some baits, sent them off. And when they came back, they were flat track leathers. Because I wanted them to stuff in my boots. And I was so disappointed because they were big, fat, But we wanted to look like the Europeans and ride like them, and they were our idols.
Yeah,
for sure.
We were trying to emulate them for sure.
Yeah.
And for me, it was amazing to line up with three world champions or future world champions in DeCosta, Robert, and Alberg.
Yeah, Charlie Panson was a world champion next year, so yes. He was just 19
Bickers.
years old. He was the youngest guy on the Husky team and one of the fastest.
And typical what you would think of as a Swede.
And Dave Vickers was really impressed. He was at the end of his career. But
he was already in his 30s.
He's probably 35 or 6 and still blazing fast. He was. I was impressed probably as much with him as any of the other guys.
He was approaching 40. Very end of his career, and you guys were the young bucks.
And Adolph Wheel was here too on a Mako, and he was no spring chicken either.
Right.
I have no idea how old he was at the time, but
he was.
But they all hauled the freight. That's all I know.
They came blowing by you, Mark.
Oh yeah.
They pass you on the right, pass you on the left, it didn't make any difference.
Kind of freaked you out,
Pass you in a turn, pass you going over a jump, just wherever.
It's pretty intimidating.
Joe, in some of the film that we have, we can pause the film and you can see the gauze tape on your chin. Let's talk about that happening on that Saturday when you won the support class.
The first heat, there's probably 20 people in our class. We had a hand-on-helmet start, and everybody had their bikes revved, and I was riding a 2-pipe CZ, and I had it revved so high when they dropped the flag, it wouldn't go in gear. So I had to drop the RPM to get it in gear, and everybody took off. I got in the first turn, maybe 15th, 18th. So I freaked out, started riding over my head and trying to catch everyone, and went over a jump too hard and hit the other side on the up and collapsed my handlebars, and my chin hit the handlebars, and I rode the last lap or two with my handlebars down, but finished, and then they just patched it up, and I rode the second heat with this patch on it.
And you won that moto.
The second one. Yeah, I think I was second in the first moto and won the second one. But there were some fast guys. They had to ride hard to catch some Jack O'Leary and some other guys in South Texas. There were some fast guys there. You had to really ride hard just to stay with them or catch them,
And in some of Shan's paperwork, there's Doug Parks' names came up. I can't remember if it was on Saturday
or the Open Junior.
And of course Ed, rode the international class. And he actually scored points, which is amazing for first time out.
He's so smooth watching him ride.
Ed was
smooth.
Huskies were hard to ride back then. They just, for me, they wouldn't go around a corner. But
Ed
Ed was one of the few. Him and later Mike Hartwig, or maybe some of the people that could actually ride a Husky close to its potential.
You mentioned Ed Terrell. He's 81 years old. He couldn't make it out here. when I think of Ed Terrell, I think of all the early Dennis Hawthorne photos when Dennis Hawthorne really became, before Dennis Hawthorne became Mr. Arena Cross, King of Arena Cross, 5-time Arena Cross champion. Before he really became Hawthorne, that we all became to know, it was Ed Terrell sponsoring him.
Ed set that all in motion.
Ed set that all in motion.
He was a mentor to him. He's a mentor to me.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
And too bad he couldn't be out here for this. But
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the beginners. I think Ed and Mark's hunting and Ed's Husky at the race a couple of months before the interim at the Stump Jumpers were the first Huskies and Pentons we'd seen. But then they started selling. And
Well, that's that little documentary that you suggested that you maybe watch. It's called Lars Larson on YouTube.
yeah,
And it pretty well ties that all in together with George Parks selling Huskies and Pentons out of his garage in late '67 or early '68.
Right.
Same time Lars made that talking about in his video. And like I said, we bumped into George out there at 360. First Husky I'd ever seen of him. I'd only seen him in magazines and stuff.
Right.
And it's amazing. It wasn't too long after that, Ed was on there and on a Husky, and I bought a Penton.
and you mentioned 360 for you guys watching the documentary. That was a kind of a free riding open area over on Highway 360 in Arlington.
Right.
That was around for decades.
Yeah, I don't know how
So
many acres.
And we rode, Adam and I rode out there, and we're youngsters compared to you guys, but to hear the story y'all out there all the way back then is incredible, because that was one fantastic place to go hone your skills and really learn and kind of dial in a motocross bike. So
that's kind of
before motocross come around, everyone was riding both Taco Matadors, Osas, trail, because we were riding enduros and hill climbs. We weren't really racing, so we had bikes with a lot of low-end torque and just woods bikes, so to speak, and weren't built and made to go fast like the motocross bikes were. So they were a different breed when the motocross bikes came around.
yeah. When I first met Ed, he was on a little Taco Matador.
Right.
And then we go out there and go out to Levon and start riding out there. So one time Ed, he said, well, why don't you jump on that Matador? So he took and folded the handlebars back and everything else. And I tried to ride that Matador, and Ronnie Golden on a Persang or a Matisse, you just, there wasn't any keeping up with it. Yeah, there were two distinct different styles of bike, back then, first starting out.
After I saw the motocross in Euless, I tried to fix my Osa. I was riding Osa for enduros, and I put a Java 21-inch front wheel on it, put a set of girdling shocks on the back, and you'd hit something rough, and it would tank slap, pitch over the handlebars, bend the forks, tear the plastic off, and first time I rode a CZ, all the difference in the world. Just completely different bike. It went over a jump, it didn't want to wiggle, and I thought, man, this is it. I saw a complete difference in the bikes. So I bought a 2-pipe CZ. Later found another one in San Angelo. We bought it for Mark, so we both got on CZs.
And them little 250 twin pipers, they had the most distinct exhaust note, way different than anything else. I don't even know how to describe it.
They were single cylinder, but they had twin exhaust pipes. And at the time, we didn't really know how rare a motorcycle they were. They were very limited production, but we didn't know. When the single high pipes came out, I sold mine for like $450. And now they're $14,000. What? It's such a limited production motorcycle. We didn't know. Had no idea.
no clue.
What year were those?
67s and 68.
So when those guys came over, we hadn't seen the single pipes.
Yeah, they had a little lure model, yes.
And a lot of them, they had twin stingers on a single piper.
Right.
Where we're going, everybody was oohing and ahhing, man, they know something, this is trick.
Trick technology.
Yeah, we got to get somebody to fix this for us.
Stan Cerny was a CZ mechanic, and we pitted pretty close to the CZ guys, of course. And we went over and asked them about the twin stingers. They said, well, he said, really, they haven't increased any horsepower, but it's brought us a lot of attention. Everybody,
publicity stunt.
People are taking pictures of them. They got attention in the magazines. She said, but we really didn't get any horsepower. We just got a lot of attention. So that was our story anyway, about the twin Stingers. They were different. But they were real friendly to us Americans and very nice to us. Most of them spoke pretty good English.
So there wasn't a total communication barrier.
No. They spoke. Robert, of course, Dave Bickers, was English. He spoke good. Blasphemo Valak he spoke fairly good English, but DeCosta spoke pretty good English. Robert spoke good English. And we didn't speak to a whole bunch of the Husqvarna guys because we were riding CZs, but they were nice to us too. We didn't get to see Torsten Hallman ride. He had gotten hurt in Pepperell, and he was there, but we were disappointed we didn't get to see him ride.
Yeah.
But we got to see all.
But we got to go to the motel.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
We found out
for the party. For the party.
For one of the first parties.
Hanging out and played pool with them and.
Yeah, my brother got to shoot a game of pool with Joel.
With Joel Robert.
Robert was a party animal.
Yeah.
All the Husky guys went to bed about 10 o'clock and they left. To see,
that's just when Joel gets started.
Robert was the last one to leave. Oh, okay.
So yeah, let's talk about real quick the crowd out here because they advertised on at SMU campus.
Channel 11. Mm-hmm.
Channel 11 came out here, shot the newsreel. I'll let y'all elaborate on KLF Radio, which is still here in Dallas. They advertised.
Right.
So what was the crowd like out here that weekend?
Well, the guys were so fast that the Europeans they would run over to one side of the fence and they make a turn and they'd run over the other side of the fence to watch them. They were running and they were all screaming, "Did you see that?" I mean, they were just freaking completely out. We'd never seen anybody ride that fast. They were just following back and forth wherever the guys were, and it was pretty amazing to see.
I wasn't too aware of the crowd. I was.
You were worried about getting lapped.
Yeah, I was worried about getting lapped and getting run over,
and they were like
knocked down,
they were like
used for traction.
Wichita, Kansas. They were like that in Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah.
So, but the Dallas folks showed up really to support the event.
Right.
And you see that in a lot of John's photos, and you see that in a lot of the film we have. Because that was new. I mean, nobody in Dallas really even knew what a motocross was.
No,
I was kind of surprised actually at the turnout.
We knew what scrambles were, rough scrambles, TT scrambles, but we had no idea what motocross was. We'd read about it in magazines, but never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I was an aspiring flat tracker to start out, but I'd always get to the back of Cycle World, and that's where the motocross report was. Yeah. And I'd ooh and ah and look at all these things, and when they finally started coming over, that was it for me. I was hooked.
We'd read the Continental Report by B.R. Nichols and read about the world, Czechoslovakia GP, the Spanish GP, French GP. So we knew the names of the guys before they got here, but we'd never seen them ride.
Any anything y'all want to really close out on? I mean, y'all been, I focus on the buddies. Y'all been friends, which is incredible. We're out here after 54 years. Likely y'all are not going to return. I mean, y'all live all far away from here, and it's desolate. And it takes a lot to even get back here. So, let's hear it, man. Any closing thoughts, John? Let's start with you. You haven't got to say a whole lot, and.
I mean, I wasn't riding that day. I was just oohing and eyeing and
shooting photos
and looking through the lens. So
your job was more important than anybody else's at that event because you documented it.
He recorded it.
Yeah. That's true. But there may have been others out here. I have no clue.
But those photos have never surfaced. There were photographers, and the photos that you supply and in the videos you see a lot of photographers. They're winding up their film, their camera. But none of those photos have surfaced.
Yeah.
This track and this event and this track, in the grand scheme of things, has all been kind of pushed aside and forgotten about. So, John Woolley, you documented history, and in my view, you're the most important figure here because you captured all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I was real privileged to be able to do that. Absolutely. I just wish I could have had a better lens and a better camera at the time, and able to capture a little bit more detail, if you will, than a 50 millimeter wide lens kind of thing from a distance. But it was really inspiring to me to be able to do this look at the results, and then end up doing more later on.
Yeah, Sean, good to hear from you. I starting to come to me now. You know, at first I couldn't remember much of the event, but that video or the movie that you had really did it. I remember, you know, we trying to get there. We had only, I think, 2 vans, and we had so many bikes because often we rode both classes, and they were all piled in there, you know, and you know, getting there. Apparently, I got money, cash from Edison to get there. I don't recall exactly getting that, but that would be typical of the time, you know, to get some cash. I mean, at the time, it was old cash. I can't even imagine now how that would work. No cards, no nothing. I mean, if you were lucky, you had a telephone card. But anyway, the track with the dugouts there reminded us very much of what we saw in Britain, you know, where they had all these holes from mines and explosions from the war, and they always ran the tracks through that. So that was pretty cool. And the race itself, you know, I can't recall exactly. You told me I finished 5th and 7th. That's something I have to think more about. But anyway, great stuff to see. Great fun we had at the time, and Edison is all responsible for this with Torsten. They got it all started, and look where we are now.
So that was the first time you'd come to Dallas, but then the second time in '68 was the race.
Yeah. We did some. We took care pretty much of our bikes ourselves. Joel, I think, was the only racer that had his mechanic from the factory with him. But like usually, Pickers and I would work together and do our bikes together. And we used to go to find one of the dealerships that was friendly and let us work in their shop, and people were so nice to us when we came to America first. You know, we started on the northeast in Massachusetts, then walked our way down, and then across towards Texas, and then later on to California.
Joe, what are your kind of final thoughts on being out here on this property?
Well, this is just, I never even dreamed of being back out here again, you know, and I was a young man then, and I'm an old man now, so yeah, it's quite a difference, but I never even dreamed of being back out here again. It's really, it's inspiring.
It's a good opportunity, yeah.
It's spiritual, I mean, put it another way, it's really something, it's really special.
Gives you goosebumps.
Really special.
When you contacted me about this, you know, I was really thrilled. I was pumped. I'd come back and see what it was like. I'm disappointed that it doesn't look like it did back then.
Yeah.
We appreciate your efforts so much to do this. We
Sure.
absolutely do.
Not a problem, Joe. You don't need to mention that.
Wonderful effort.
Mark, your thoughts. You did admit 20 minutes ago on the film that you've dreamed about this, you've thought about it, you hope to return, and I mean, look around you, Mark. This is, you know, you were 17-year-old kid signing up in the pro class, getting your tail whipped by the Europeans, and you smile about it and you loved it, and you went on to beat up on Wyman Pretty and all the other guys in Texas motocross folklore and race them all really hard and establish your own identity. And it all started out here in this, you know, this big old overgrown field river bottom now. So what are your thoughts, Mark?
Well, it's just great to be back, and I guess what I take most out of it is all the friendships that got started at this time, and to this day we're still tight and enjoy each other's company, and never a harsh word or anything else. And then beyond that is meeting young motocrossers that came after us and everything else, and the camaraderie that's involved there. So I mean, it was just kind of a starting point, and nobody came out here ever thinking that we'd be sitting here 54 years later talking about this, like to the day that, you know, that we'd be sitting out here talking about something like this. And it's just kind of a fluky deal for me, being fortunate enough to stumble into this thing, you know, at the right, you know, at the beginning of it. So nothing special there, just happened to be, you know, everything came together and got it started off.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Motorcycle racers are a very special brotherhood. They really are. You don't know any bowlers or people that used to snow ski or anything together.
Pickleball.
That are tight knit like motorcycle racers. I mean, that's my viewpoint of it. I mean, I might be wrong, but they're a very special brotherhood because I had one of my ex-wives, I can't remember which one, she asked me one time, she said, all your friends, they're so different. What's different? And I've thought about it for a long time, and it hit me. We all have mutual respect for each other. We all went out there and risked a life and limb to do what we did, and there's a respect with motorcycle racers that I don't see in other people. You know, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my viewpoint.
And you've hawked everything you've owned just to buy another bike or some
Yeah,
parts.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Finance the house.
Yeah. That's a commonality right there.
Yeah. How many of y'all have pulled your race bikes into a hotel room
Yeah,
overnight,
right,
keep it from getting stolen off the trailer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Work on it.
Well, boys, I think this is it. We got one other thing we're going to do. Mike, Adam, y'all come around to the back side. Montoya is going to hand you something.
It's not that bottle of booze, is it?
It's better.
Ooh, looky here. Holy mackerel.
Wow.
Oh, look at that. Oh,
Oh, no way.
Oh, wow.
No way.
is that cool?
Thank
Wow.
you. Man, that is awesome.
That's unbelievable. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's get a good smile for the camera here.
Oh, yeah.
That's beyond words
Oh,
right
yeah.
there.
Isn't that cool?
It's a group effort here, and we're glad that everybody was able to make it out, and we're glad that we're friends with you guys, and that y'all paved the way here for all of us youngsters to enjoy, guys.
Thank you, guys.
That's the key.
Thank you for
Thank
putting it
you.
all together.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's a keepsake for life right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
We are definitely shedding a little light on a forgotten event. Up until now, there was just not a lot to be seen from the media. The 1968 Dallas Interam has kind of been the forgotten round in the series and in the grand scheme of things. We are bringing this event back to life by shedding some positive light onto it. The history of the sport is written by the racers. These three helped kickstart the first pages of the first chapter in the Texas Motocross book. This is the ultimate, never-ending quest experienced by all racers to maybe one day go back to your old original stomping grounds and tracks. These guys have waited 54 years wondering about this track and location, as well as this race event for this entire time. How many times have you wished you could go back to the property of an old track?